Greetings, everyone in the Facebook and YouTube world. I am Dennis Rogov with the Real Estate Investor Roundtable. We are streaming across multiple Facebook channels as well as YouTube channels, and our goal is to provide you the most up-to-date real estate information so that you make smart decision when it comes to your real estate investment needs, whether it's inside commercial or residential space. Myself, I am actively involved in creative real estate. So, just not the traditional investment real estate, but real estate that you have to strategize and have multiple exit strategies. And that's really what we try to bring here on this show. With that said, I have a good friend of mine, Bryan Demuro, who is our special guest today, and he's going to be able to talk about his background and hopefully answer some questions. Now, I posted inside Facebook. Actually, at some point, I have to go back and see if anybody asked a question. But Bryan, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you being here. And with that, can you tell a little bit about yourself and before you got into real estate and after you got into real estate?
Yeah, absolutely, Dennis. Thank you very much for having me. I actually got into real estate when I was 22. Before that, I went to high school. I ended up getting homeschooled my last year of school. I was racing motocross and skateboarding, and I was traveling around racing dirt bikes for a little while. And I ended up getting really hurt in Florida when I was 20. And from then, it was just like, what's the next thing I'm gonna do? And back home here, I was working with a dude that owned storage units. He had multiple rental properties. His name was Dan. And I was kind of noticing the life that he had. And I was like, man, this is kind of cool. This guy at the time is 45 years old and just kind of does what he wants. Coincidentally, it was a lot of community service type stuff and giving back. And, I was kind of like, man, this is kind of something I want to do. And long story short, I questioned him and asked him for about 2 years to lend money on my first flip. And we did a flip house when I was 22, sold it when I was 23. Right after that, I got into managing storage units. I did that for his storage unit company. Um, I didn't buy my first rental till I was 26. That was 2018. I ended up buying 3 properties that year. I did a flip house. I did a creative finance deal that year. And then I also just a standard 20% down purchase on an off market property. Um, and pretty much ever since then, I've been doing, a handful of deals every year. Currently, right now, I'm at 16 units. I have 2 multifamily properties, 4 single-family homes, and a triple net lease office building. And I'm managing 471 storage units. So,
Is in what span of time, essentially, you got up to this kind of caliber of investment?
say that again, Dennis. The very beginning I missed.
Um, what's the time frame that it took to get you to this kind of state where you have 471 units, you have 16 total units as far as under
So,
your management that you own yourself?
oh, okay. So the 471 storage units, I am not a owner in. That was originally
Mhm.
I ended up moving from doing maintenance work for Dan, and I started managing his business for him. But it's been about 5.5 years, and I went from 0 units to 16.
Wow, that's impressive.
Hmm. And
Your
here's
first unit that
here's
you acquired.
the coolest thing
Okay.
about this, Dennis, is I was making at the time before taxes because I was 1099, $26,400 a year, and I was able to grow up to where I'm at now. So it's possible.
Wow, that's amazing. So, what was your mindset when you first got into your first deal? Were you watching any kind of podcasts? Were you reading any specific kind of books? Like, what was your mindset like? Like, I always see people who are transitioning into something new. There's always a reason Maybe they talked to somebody, they watched a movie. I see that you mentioned that you really like this guy Dan, but was there a plan that you were essentially going into that first flip, or how did you like come to Dan and say, "Hey Dan, I have this flip, and let's partner up on it," or was there more to
So
it?
that there was a lot more to it. In 2011, long story short, he bought a abandoned building in town, tore the whole thing down to a block shell, and totally rebuilt it. He sunk about $300,000 into it, and this was like I said, we tore this building down to a block shell. And I did all the construction work with him on that, went through code. I was doing construction on his rentals. So I had the ability, like I was able to work with my hands. And he wasn't down to flip a house with me for, like I said, 2 years. I asked him every 2 weeks for about 2 years. And eventually he, just to kind of shut me up, was like, fine, go find one, expecting nothing to happen. And jokes on him because I found one. And he was really hesitant. I was 22. I had $1,600 to my name. And I was drinking tap water, eating sandwiches, really, with peanut butter and jelly. That's what I could afford for about 9 months while we did this job. But after everything went through, he saw, there's a difference between saying you want to do something and actually doing it. And once he saw that I was actually going to do it and I did it, that's when everything changed for me. So it wasn't like I just walked up to him and was like, hey, let me do this, let's do this. It was years of me providing value and putting, his goals in front of mine for him to eventually give me the opportunity to do what I wanted to do.
That is so cool. When it comes to somebody who is watching this or will watch this in the future, and they are essentially just graduated college and they are um, looking at YouTube trying to figure out what they're going to do next, what advice can you give them as far as not potentially giving up, or should they just go find another Dan in their local area, and how would they do something like that?
Well, there's a couple ways to go about it, in my opinion. If you go up to somebody and be like, will you be my mentor? That's the worst way to do it. I would say go to networking events. Go find the people in your market that are doing something and find what they're looking for, what a problem of there is, and find a way to solve it. If you can find a dude that's, I'm looking for off-market houses, and you ask them, well, hey, what kind of properties are you looking for? Get a detailed list of what they're looking for and go out and find them. And if you can find them properties, it'll show that you're serious. Or, there are some people out, like in my market, that they're open and they want to talk to as many people as they can. Go talk to them. And if they give you advice, go and do that. Go do what they tell you, like this is your next step. You go and just do it, in perfect action, and just make it happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually did a podcast slash post video where I talked about the concept of don't be asking how I can help you. I think that's kind of the same thing. Will you be my mentor? Because people a lot of times will come to you, they see your success, and they want you to find what they're good at or
Mhm.
what they can do to help you. And I always say that's not the right way to go about it. It's very incorrect way to go about it. But I also find that a lot of people are then stuck in saying like, okay, well, if I essentially don't do that, what do I do? And you mentioned go to network events. So, would you have any advice for somebody who's just starting out? What should they be doing at network events as a following network events? Excuse me. Um, Once they identify the person that they want to learn more about.
I would say try to exchange information with them. Once you exchange information with them, just be in contact with them. I mean, don't pester them, but be in contact with them. Call them. Develop like genuine friendships. Like, don't take it as like, what can I get from you? Like, become friends with the people. you can learn a lot from people, especially when you're not going with like a greedy, like, what can I get out of this? Not everything in life's transactional. Maybe here's the deal: a dude that you're sitting beside at a networking event, if you just become friends with him, you never know. 5 years down the line, if you're looking for something, maybe he knows somebody that knows somebody. So, I mean, don't take everything so super transactional when you're meeting people. I mean, just literally just go out and be authentic and original. Just be yourself and be polite and talk to people and make friends with them. And, if they're like, hey, give me a call Tuesday at 5 o'clock, you give them a call Tuesday at 5 o'clock. You know what I mean? Follow through, because a lot of these people are really busy. I mean, a lot of these people in the industry are really busy doing things. And if they're going to make the time for you, be respectful of their time and be on time.
Love it. Thank you. And by the way, that brings to the quote that I have: never dig your well while you're thirsty. So make sure, as Brian mentioned, that you don't look at people as transactional. You look at people as people, and everybody has a story. Everybody has relationships existing already. Everybody has family of some kind. Um, just treat everybody as people, and as Brian mentioned, not just essentially transactional. I get so upset when I have these situations happen to me. So I get friended a lot. I mean, I have lots of people that are friending me, and when people friend me, I usually give them about a week to essentially reach out to me,
Mhm.
and they don't. So I reach out to them, and if they don't respond within a week, I defriend them. I just
Mhm.
I, I just I just don't feel like I need to continue investing into that relationship if all they did is mass friended, and either they want to see my post or whatever the case is. But to me, that's just odd. Have you experienced that, Brian, by any chance?
Yes. I have a pretty, I'm not going to say substantial, but a pretty good following on like Instagram and Facebook. Um, but with skateboarding in the area, a lot of people know me running a skate park and stuff like that too. So I get hit across a couple avenues, whether it's real estate or skateboarding. But I do notice a lot of people will friend, and I do, just like you, I try to reach out with them and just see what they're about. I mean, not like sweat them out or anything like that, but hey, tell me some about yourself. I mean, it never, in my opinion, it never really hurts to exchange stories and hear somebody's story. It's always entertaining to me. Nothing's the same, you know.
Yeah, you never know. Like they always say, your next deal, your next opportunity away. You just got to ask. You got to ask the right questions.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So here's a question I have for you. I'm trying to ask the right questions. And, by the way, everybody who's watching this, if you have any questions for Brian that I'm not going to ask today, please post them and I'll be happy to get them to him. And maybe he'll be so gracious to respond to them as well. But I like to go a little deep. And everybody talks about on YouTube, Facebook, their success factor. That's attractive, that's appealing, that allows people to um, be inspired. But and it is changing. It is changing. I'm not going to say that it's not something that is only that. It is changing.
Mhm.
But there's some posts that I've seen, like you have an iceberg, right? And the top of the iceberg you can only see maybe like 50 feet up, but it's like a mile down, right?
Mhm.
So with that in sight in mind, Brian, my next question for you is: can you tell me about the time when you had to make an important decision quickly and long term it turned out to be a wrong decision? And what did you learn from that?
So I've been lucky that I haven't had any super detrimental issues that have came up. But to answer your question, I'm actually going to tell you about my first rental property I bought. Um, and actually, I need to finish answering a question from earlier. It all kind of ties in, and it was about how I got into buying my first rental property. Um,
Hmm.
I uh, I didn't know that I was going to start buying rentals at the time. I was trading debit and credit spreads and options, and I mean, I was okay at it. I mean, I lost some money, made some money, but I was doing that in storage, and I was like, I'm just going to buy a rental house. Look at all the wealthy families, they own real estate. So I was like, I'm just going to buy one rental house. And I didn't really look into it that well. This is how naive I was. And there's a good lesson out of it. And it was my rent or my mortgage payment was 517.73 a month. My rent was 650. So I was like, man, I'm cash flowing. I wasn't even thinking about, insurance, taxes, all that stuff. So it was like a net loss if you average it out before depreciation. It was a net loss of about 1,300 a year. So it was a little over $100 a month that I was losing. Now, the beauty in this is, and I'm not saying to go out and buy a bad deal, but the thing with the first deal that I think is really important is that your first deal isn't going to be a grand slam. It's very rare that your first deal is a grand slam. The idea of your first deal is that you're doing your first deal, you're in the pool swimming, and you're doing it. You know what I mean? Now, being said, I've raised rents over the years and now I'm cash flow positive. And the lesson that I've learned is that even if you buy something that doesn't cash flow, as long as you're not hemorrhaging money, and again, I'm not saying to go and buy a cash flow negative deal, but if you're able to hold and raise rents, eventually things will catch up and you'll be okay. It took 4 years to do that, but I mean, it's cash flow positive now, and it's not a drain on my account. But that's
So,
probably one of the bigger mistakes that I've made.
somebody told me a while ago, there's only bad deals if you're holding it just for a very short period of time. So if you're trying to do something that we call wholesaling, or assignment,
Mhm.
yes, that can be potentially a bad deal. But with the way the economy is transitioning, and we're recording this in 2023, who knows when somebody's going to watch this, and it might be
Mhm.
5 years, 10 years from now. That's the beauty about YouTube and all of these social medias. You do have a timestamp, and you have these, what I call them, uh, bots working for you for
Mhm.
forever until YouTube gets taken down. But essentially, whenever somebody watches this, whenever you buy a property, absolutely you can potentially lose on it initially. But if you hold it over 30 years, mathematically, I
You
don't think
win.
it's even possible for you to lose. It just isn't. I
Well,
mean,
here's the cool thing for me about this, Dennis, was my friend Dan was, he was always by my side. I mean, this guy is very, 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 very well off. And, I'm 26 and I'm like, dude, I'm losing it money every month. And he goes, Bryan, you have 35% equity on this property. You know what I mean? It was $100,000 house and I owed 65.5 on it. And he's like, are you really losing? Think of it like this. Are you really losing? So a really good thing about having that guy in my network was I wasn't looking at it like, oh man, I'm losing money every month. Initially I did, but I got the experience. I was able to soak up 30 years of experience of somebody else and be like, dude, you're still 35,000 ahead because you bought this thing correctly. And hey, just raise the rents on it. So I mean, that really helped adapt my mindset on that as well. But like you said, I mean, if you can hold mathematically, unless something drastic and rare happens, most of the time you'll be fine and you'll be happy you did. I would rather see someone buy a $250,000 break even property now and hold it for 10 years compared to not buy anything. In 10 years, you bought that property that, after your expenses, you're at nothing. 10 years from now, you'll be so happy that you bought it.
Yeah. And that's what I think, right now we're in a point where a lot of, I mean, I follow a lot of podcasts. I like to absorb podcasts. Um, and there's some big investment podcasts that I listen to. And what I find based on everything that they're saying is that real estate will continue getting more and more expensive.
Mm.
There's obviously factors that can potentially bring in a crash, but if that does happen, I don't think anybody's going to want to own real estate because one component that I heard was that if there's a major war and everybody goes to war, then you're not going to have the tenants. Are you of that belief, Brian, that when it comes to real estate, we're just going to keep trending up, or do you see that there will be a crash in the near future?
This is my answer on it. I am not a magician. I can't predict the future. My thoughts on it are, though, it's a supply and demand issue. There's still just not enough houses for the people that are out there. I can tell you in Central PA where I lived, we have about 1 month of supply on the market still, which is, that's not, it's still a seller's market, and some of the bigger markets, Phoenix, Miami, you've seen those pullbacks. Whenever all that was happening, I was like, geez, I hope that happens here. Not saying that in a mean way towards people with the equity in their homes, but like that's a buying opportunity. And at least where I'm at, I haven't seen it yet. The only thing that's really changed here is the cost of debt has gone up. And that's just in Central PA. I mean, I can't answer across the board, but if a
Right.
real estate crash comes, I mean, what am I going to do? I can't change it. The only thing I can do is position myself the best I can to capitalize on it.
What I have a partnership question for you, Brian.
Okay.
What industry tools do you now have at your disposal that you did not have access to when you were operating alone? So I really want to. There's this term about that there's certain leaders develop squad up, JV, but I think what happens is a lot of times people don't know what that means.
Mhm.
So from your perspective, before you partner up with Dan, what differences you saw versus when you started partnering up with him, from a tools processes perspective?
So Dan was kind of actually old school about things. He is 61, I'm 31, we're about 30 years apart. Um, when I started managing storage, they did it out of 3-ring binders. So I was the one that brought Sentinel systems and brought the storage software and whatnot. Um, like I said, the way Dan did stuff was old school. It was a different time when he was doing it compared to now. His thing was, he wanted to build storage to help build a life that he wanted to and how he could give back and help with the community. And that's what he did. And that's great. He succeeded in his goal, and his long-term goal was to be able to give back. Um, as for what I use now, though, I use Door Loop for my property management software. It's kind of everything's together. It's condensed. It's a really good software. I use PropStream for a lot of my skip tracing, and I use Sentinel systems with self storage.
Gotcha. So you, we talk a lot about your real estate portfolio, but an- that's an area that you're growing, but you really are expanding inside your storage unit portfolio, and that is essentially where you and Dan really partner up on.
Mhm.
So my question for you: is it a big leap for somebody who is a real estate investor, um, who's a fix and flipper, maybe even a wholesaler, for them to get involved in something like storage unit business? And if they do, what do they start? Like do they just go get a job at a storage unit?
Um, that's a pretty
Like
tricky question, Dennis. Um, I'll say this.
if I tomorrow, hey, is you
Say that again. You
like
broke up, buddy.
just had. Did you hear what I said? Did you hear what I said? Did you hear what I
Nope.
said?
Nope.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, I can.
Hear me? Okay. I had a really good question, but it kind of went away. So my question for you is, for somebody who is a wholesaler, um, fix and flipper, single family residential investor, they want to get involved in storage, right? What
Hmm.
advice would you give these people? Do they go get a job at a storage place? Do they call up all the storage local areas and say, hey, listen, I want to learn how to operate because I want to start my own? Like, where do
Hmm.
they start? Like, and how is that transition from residential to storage? Is it a big learning curve? Is there specific kind of skills that you need to have?
I'll be honest. Managing storage is a hell of a lot easier than managing multifamily or single family homes. You don't have the liability of a water pipe breaking in a wall. Um, you have four walls, a ceiling, a roll up door, and a light switch. So the management of storage is pretty easy. As for how to get into it, um, it's one of the people make it seem a little harder than it is to get into. Now, I mean, I was really lucky and met the right person at a young age. I was 15 when I met Dan and I started working for him then. So, I mean, I kind of got lucky, but I can say from the outside looking in, um, the best way to locate these people is to go to Google, type in storage near wherever market you're looking for, and call them mom and pop owners. The thing is, you're having REITs and big chains come in, and they're scooping all of them up. On a management side, I can tell you that the management of the property here doesn't take nearly as long as what you would think. I mean, I'm in my office, unless I have about two paperwork days that I'm doing paperwork all day. Typically, I'm in for about 2 hours, checking my emails, checking my phone, entering checks, maybe locking people out. Um, I would say, honestly, the biggest barrier to entry with this is financing or raising
Hmm.
capital is very similar to multifamily. You don't really find storage units for sale for, $250,000. I mean, typically, you're looking 2, 4, 6, 8 million for these, to acquire these properties. But I mean, if you're doing fix and flip, you're able to talk to people, you're able to raise some money, you have some experience in that. As for single family homes, I can tell you that I'm actually going to be selling one of my homes to complete an acquisition that we're working on right now. Um, I'm not saying to move all that equity from single family into storage, but I mean, it's an option. Just I would say the hardest barrier to entry with it is literally just the raising of the capital for it because the management of it is very simple.
Can you talk a little bit about your latest acquisition into storage? How did you find it? Uh, what's your acquisition process? What is your plan once you acquire it?
Okay. So we're still working on this deal. Kind of getting the final things laid out with it. But it was off market. It actually came from a broker relation that I had. Um, I mean, I get calls from brokers all the time, and instead of just hanging up on them, I talk to them, tell them what I'm looking for, and develop relationships with them.
Hmm.
Um, as for what it is, it's 202 storage units, and it's actually a competing business with ours. I mean, it's about 15 miles away. Um,
Hmm.
as of right now, we're negotiating. It should be a 30-year amortization, 5-year balloon at 5% interest, and we'll be bringing down around $500,000. Um, So whenever we buy it, if everything goes through, it looks like it's going to, but like I said, we're just doing the final stuff. There's a small subdivision that needs to be done. We're waiting on all of that right now. But I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, just slowly raise the rents. The guy's taken really good care of it, really, really good care. But I mean, we'll be raising rents. Rebranding the business to another Paul store. That was kind of vision of mine. I got to the point that I was able to buy this from Dan, and I was like, dude, why don't we just build this out more? Add more facilities, and so it'll be an interesting goal, an interesting process. Not so much goal, but I mean, I'll be at that point in time bringing in a manager and teaching them what I do, and that'll be a whole new learning experience for me. And that's one of the things that I'm not really anxious over, but it's a new thing that I have to learn. You know what I mean? So it'll definitely help, and it's just a skill that I need to acquire and do if I want to keep growing and doing what I want to do. So you're not growing if you're not uncomfortable.
In a storage space that you're acquiring, is there like whenever we talk about a multifamily I can relate to, we can potentially add a dog run, we can add a pool, we can add
Mhm.
we can add a playground. When you acquire storage units, is there any value adds that's available to essentially increase increase that capex and maybe increase the value of the property,
Yes,
or is it predominantly
there are a few things you can do. With this one, the way it's laid out, it's kind of maxed out on space. Our value add is will be adding more NOI to the project by raising the rents. Um,
okay?
Being said, if you can find there was a smaller storage facility that when I finally decided like I was ready to do this, I reached out to them. It was off market and they just went under contract, but it was like 50 some units, and there was doors falling off, no lights, and that would be a great value add. The thing was ran into the ground. But things that you can do, you can add RV parking. RV parking
Hmm.
is really good. You can add selling boxes and like packaging material for moving in. Um, RV spots are great. Again, it's just with the facility that we're taking on, they've pretty much maxed out the space,
Hmm.
just the rents below market, and there's the ability to bring it up.
Can you build like I mean, would would you or considered an option, because I'm seeing storage units, what's happening is that they're actually building them up. So they're not building just as far as expansion, but essentially even taking out some storage units and then just building like, 2, 3, 4 stories, um, uh, essentially facility to add more space, not expanding, but going up. Is that
Um,
something that you considered, or would you recommend that strategy in
it,
storage
it all
space?
depends. It all depends, like with the market. I mean, for where I'm at with the population that we're at, it kind of works the way it is. I mean, we were lucky enough that we'll be able to raise the rents. Um, and maybe add some amenities like boxes and stuff like that. If you're in a higher density area, it absolutely would make sense to add up if you have the supply for it. Um, just with the type of buildings that we have, these ones they're block buildings with just your standard metal roofs on them. They're not flat; they're peaked.
Hmm.
So it just really would make sense to tear all that out and build up. But depending, like I said, on the type of structure that you have existing, yeah, it can make sense to do that. It just, like I said, a lot depends on the market and just, where you're at.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm actually hearing people go into like these like big box stores that are completely vacant, whether there was Kmart or basically large facilities. Kmart is the only one I can think of because that's the one, and
Mhm.
they're actually converting that to storage units.
Yeah, that's been a trend for the last
And
years now.
I mean, how do you even underwrite that? Like, I mean, because the reason is I actually have a very nice area where I have a place where Michaels went out of business,
Mhm.
and I mean, it's a lot of space.
Yeah.
Could that be
Well,
potentially something that could be turned into a storage unit? I mean, the area around that is a Class A area. I mean, we got
mhm.
Starbucks, we got Target. I mean, but what's
So
funny is that on the same street there is two additional storage units being that are in place. There's one like very large one, probably about a mile down the road, and they're adding another one next to a community that has average home price over 1 million. Like literally, they're putting a community there of storage units that's going to be 3 stories high.
mhm.
So
I would reach out to a storage broker and check supply for the area,
okay,
first of all, but the underwriting of that's if you're talking about taking like a Michaels and adding a second story in Michaels, that's a whole different thing. I mean, it would still be acquisition cost and then renovation cost and then rent minus, the underwriting would pretty much be the same, but you're just really factoring in the renovation costs as you do stuff. I mean, that's something that I haven't done yet. I would love the opportunity to try to underwrite that, but I mean, as far as I would imagine, it would be the exact same as your standard underwriting, just with a lot bigger numbers.
gotcha. Okay. Really appreciate you taking the time today. What I want to do is just ask you a couple of questions. It's random questions. They don't really go in order or any specific anything related to that. But before I do that, I always ask this question. Whether I'm doing a podcast, whether I'm doing one of my masterminds, um, this really puts you into the seat of asking potentially yourself a question. And that question is, what is the one question that I should have asked you, but I didn't, and you feel like it will be very knowledgeable from your part to share with our audience. Um, anything?
Dennis, that was actually the last question you asked me in our first conversation that I had with you. um, a question that you should have asked. Hmm. I'm not really sure, to be honest. I mean, you were pretty solid with everything. I mean, why? Like a good why is always a good question to ask. Um, and I mean, we kind of covered what I'm working on in the future. So, I mean, I think that's a pretty good, a look into the future. I think why, a good why is probably what you might have missed.
So tell us why.
All right, so my why is I really enjoy giving back to the community. Dan and I have ran a free indoor skate park for 11 and a half years for the kids. I mean, he pays for it. I spend all my time taking care of it, being there for the kids. Um, and it's consistent hours. I mean, for 11 and a half years, if I'm not there on Friday, I've been abducted by aliens. So pretty much every Friday night, I'm at the skate park, spending time with the kids and being a good role model for them. Outside of that, I mean, the standard stuff. I want to take care of my parents, my family. I'm not married or have kids, as you can see. I have cats running around me, like
That's
always.
awesome.
Whenever I'm on my computer, they're just being pests. But I just really want to make a difference in my community and make the world a little bit of a better place. Like I can't change the world, but I can change my world and I can change the things that are immediately around it. And real estate has given me the opportunity to do that.
Thank you so much. So now we get back to our 3 questions. So question number 1, favorite quote.
Favorite quote: massive and perfect action. I mean, um, everybody messes up. I still mess up when I do stuff. Dennis, I'm sure you still occasionally mess up when you do stuff. Nobody
all
does
the time.
everything perfect. I mean, I know you and I have both seen it with many people. Being scared to mess up stops them from taking that first step. And the biggest thing is you just got to go out and do it. I mean, I'm not saying dive headfirst into a pool when you can't swim, but get out and just start talking to people and figuring out what you want to do, you know?
Second question: what is the one place that you want to travel?
Oh man. So I went to Australia, and thanks to COVID, I almost was stuck in Australia for a few months. I really want to go back, and I want to go into the center of the country. I was able to, hang out around Sydney. I really want to check out the outback. I mean, I got to spend time in a dry rainforest, and that was really cool. But the outback, I think, would be awesome.
Third question: if money and time was no object, what would you want to get accomplished this year?
This year, if money and time wasn't an object, so this would be like a non-real estate thing.
Anything.
Oh man, if money and time wasn't an object, um, obviously I'd like to volunteer more time to do stuff. Like, I spent most of my Saturday painting the community pool. Um, I would just like to find stuff to like give back, meet more people, and try to motivate more people to do stuff. And I don't mean motivate them in a bad way, but I mean like be positive reinforcement to people. I mean, ultimately, I just want people to have a positive experience and be able to learn, And I think if I would be able to just, affect the lives of people for a year, that would be fine. If money and time wasn't an issue, I would go and try to talk to as many kids as I can and see what they want to do and just kind of tell them like, yo, you can still do this. Like you can do whatever you want in this life. Go out and do it.
Brian, I really, and I'm sure everybody else who watches this, appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule of running storage units, running the properties that you own, and running the parks the skateboard parks that you work in and you manage. Thank you so much for taking the time. Where can folks get a hold of you if watching this video they're like, I want to connect with Brian, I want to have a conversation with him?
Absolutely. You can look me up on Facebook at Bryan Demuro or on Instagram at Bryan_Demuro. And you can send me an email at streetcatinvestments@outlook.com.
Brian, thank you so much once again coming on. And that marks the end of our podcast/show. We'll be back next Sunday, consistently 7 p.m. Eastern Time, with either another guest, and I'll have that posted in Facebook shortly. Thank you, everyone. Have a pleasant rest of the day and an amazing upcoming up week.